what's up and welcome. I'm the one and only West Coast King, and welcome back to Major League 90, where we are talking Major League Soccer. And finally, the new season is upon us, less than a week away now. Portland and Minnesota will get things kicked off in this upcoming 2017 regular season, and I cannot wait. I'm going to be watching that match. I'm going to watch as many matches as I can this weekend. Of course, be tuning into the reigning champion Seattle Sounders taking on Houston in their first match as well. But today, it's all about the predictions. It is prediction time. Let's figure out where these teams are going to finish, who's going to be moving up and who's going to be moving down, who's improved and who has shit the bed when it comes to improving their team. So this is going to be broken up into two parts. Today is going to be the Eastern Conference, and we'll wrap up tomorrow with the West. So let's get this thing started. We're going to go from worst to first. So the team that I think is going to be bottom of the Eastern Conference this year, a place that Chicago has called home for the last couple of seasons, is not going to be Chicago. I don't think Chicago is going to finish last in the Eastern Conference. I believe it is going to be the team that finished just above them last year, the Columbus Crew. I had them last year. I think I picked them to finish first place in the Eastern Conference, either first or second. I can't really remember. I think I might have had Toronto first and Columbus second, somewhere in there. I'm not really sure, but I had them at least top two in the East. Last year, they finished ninth. This year, I think they're actually going to be worse. I think they're going to finish in last place. And now that there's 11 teams in the East, they're dropping 2 spots, which is never a fun thing to have happen. But I think every team in the league, or at least nearly every team in the league, made one move this offseason that you can look at and go, ooh, that guy's going to help this team this upcoming season. I don't think Columbus made that move. They made a lot of moves. A lot of their players coming in this season are from the Super Draft, so they're younger players. But I don't think that they've really made a move that is significant enough that's going to help them drastically this season. I think that they're really going to be worse than they were last year. 2 years ago, they were nearly MLS Cup champions. Just lost out to Portland in the final. This year, I think that they're now the worst team in the East. So moving up one spot, I think it's going to be Chicago. Technically, it's not an improvement because they're still finishing in 10th place, but at least they're not last anymore, which is pretty good. I mean, that's a step in the right direction, I think. But they have made a couple of significant improvements. Bringing in Dax McCarty is going to help them significantly. He's a good player, and it gives them that veteran leadership presence that I think that they've been missing for a couple of seasons. The addition of Juninho is going to be big for them as well. He's another good MLS veteran now added to that mix. And adding Nikolic, the striker, up top is going to help them offensively somewhere they desperately needed that help. And if he can score goals, that's going to be a huge improvement for that team. So I think it's a step in the right direction for them. I don't think that they've fully turned that franchise around, but I do think that they're starting to now show the signs of building to something bigger. So I like the steps that they've made. It's not going to be enough to really have significant impact this season, but I do think they're going to be a little bit better than they were last year. Coming in the number 9 spot, I have Orlando City. And for the worst defense in the league last year, they needed help across that back line. They got it in the form of Jonathan Spector. And they brought in Will Johnson, a defensive midfielder, to also help with that problem. But I don't know if it's going to be enough to really push them into the playoff picture. They were close last season. They finished 1 point out of the playoffs despite having the worst defense. But it wasn't enough. And I don't think that they've added enough offensively to really help them. They've also lost Kevin Molino, who I still rate as one of the better young stars or up-and-coming stars in this league. So I don't think that they've done enough to really push that team forward any. But I don't think that they've lost any ground. I'm pretty sure they're just going to be kind of the same team that they were last season. Slightly better defensively, but maybe slightly worse offensively. Coming in the number 8 spot, I have the new addition to the Eastern Conference, Atlanta United. They have made a lot of moves before this first season, and I think it's going to pay off. I mean, they didn't just go out and get players, try to fill their roster, just having 11 guys on the field. They went out and got specific players for specific roles to play a certain style, and I really think it's going to pay dividends. They went out and they built a team. A real true team, and I think it's really going to be interesting to see how well they can do. I think that they're going to be a team that is going to be maybe right on the fringe of the playoffs. I don't think they're going to be able to put it all together this season and make that push and become a playoff team in their first year. No team has done that, I think, since the Seattle Sounders, and I don't see it happening again. But I think that they're going to be a good team. I think they're going to be a team that's going to be difficult to beat. Maybe if they are able to put it all together, they might sneak into the playoffs in like the 6th spot. But I think for now, an 8th place finish would be a successful first season in the league. In the number 7 spot, I have a team that actually made a really deep playoff run last season in Montreal. I think they just narrowly miss out on the playoffs this season. I think that they've lost too much, and they're not like names that you would really think of as important players for them, but I feel like they're undervalued or underrated players that really had an impact in that team. Obviously, Didier Drogba is no longer there, though I don't think they really had too much of a problem getting along without him last season, so I don't think that's going to be that significant. However, the loss of Johan Venegas, I think, is actually very, very significant. He was very good for them last year in the playoffs, a player that's fast, shifty, creative, just kind of an everywhere type of a player, that he's no longer there. And I think Minnesota did a really good job of going out and getting him. I think that's going to be a significant loss for them. No longer having Harry Shipp to fall back on in case they need an extra player. I think that's going to be a bit of a problem as well. So I'm not sure really where they're going to fall. I think 7th is the best spot I can think of for them. But they very well could be a playoff team again. But I think I just have to barely have them narrowly, by the narrowest of margins, maybe on goal difference or something, just narrowly missing out on the playoffs this year. So now we find ourselves in the playoff positions, the top 6 going in to next season. In the number 6 spot, I have New England, and it's nothing that they've done in the transfer window this offseason. It's not any player or players that they've brought in. As a matter of fact, they haven't done much in the transfer window as far as actually adding to that team. They've only brought in 4 players, and none of them are all that significant. Instead, what I really like about that team is the way they finished last year. They had some of the worst months I've ever seen for a playoff team that actually almost made the playoffs. They built up one of the worst goal differentials in the league and very nearly came all the way back to make the playoffs, just narrowly missing out on goal difference, which is just the one thing that they could not overcome. If it wasn't for that goal difference that they had built up all year, they would have been a playoff team. And they finished the season on such a high note that I do have confidence in them going into next season. I think that they could be a playoff team. Again, Montreal could slide in there. Atlanta could slide in there. I don't know. I think all those teams right there are very, very close together as far as how good they're going to be. But I think New England could just find themselves in one of those final playoff spots. In the number 5 spot, I have Philadelphia, and they're kind of the exact opposite of New England. They got off to a really, really good start, played pretty consistently all season long, and then towards the end they started to fall off and almost nosedived right out of the playoffs. Thankfully, their goal difference wasn't all that bad, and it saved them a playoff spot. However, I'm impressed by them because of what they've done in this transfer window. Going out and getting a veteran like Oguchi Onyewu, I think is going to be really, really big for that defense. They need that defensive help. Also picking up a player like Haris Medunjanin from Maccabi Tel Aviv. I think that's a really good player to bring in and add to that midfield, as well as a player like Fafa, I can't ever say his name, Pico? Is it Pico? I don't know, but I think he's a really, really good player to add to the team as well, coming over, I think, from Germany. So that's where he was playing. I think I've seen him play in Germany. Wasn't it like St. Pauli? I don't remember, but I know he's a really, really good player. I've seen him play before. I like what they've done. I think that they've gone out and gotten the right players to help that team in the ways that they needed the help, and I think that it's going to be an improvement over last season. I think that they're going to be at least a playoff team. Whether it's 5th or 6th, I still think they claim one of those spots. Coming in the number 4 spot, I have DC United. They finished 4th last season, and I think they're going to finish there once again. They haven't done really anything to make me think that they've caught those 3 teams above them, and there is a significant gap between those top 3 teams in the East and then everybody else, but I think DC is kind of the top of everybody else. They have a very, very good defense, one of the better defenses in the league. They were a very good goal-scoring team, not one of the best, but definitely didn't struggle in that category all that much. They could use a little bit more help there, but I'm not saying that that's going to be a weakness for them. I think that they're going to do just fine. I think that they kind of got a little unlucky last year with 9 draws on the road with only 2 wins. If they could find a way to pull out a couple more of those wins, they could see themselves elevated into that mix with those top 3 teams. But for now, I think that they're still just going to be the 4th place team. It's not that bad. I mean, just the 4th place team. I'm saying that like it's an awful situation, but there's definitely hope for on the horizon as well. A player like Ian Harkes coming into that team, the best college player last year in collegiate football, coming in now to that team. I think he's going to be pretty decent. He's kind of along the same lines of Jordan Morris, as he's a homegrown player going to play for his hometown team. It's a team that his dad played for. There's going to be a lot of pressure on him, I know that the coach has said that he's not going to have a guaranteed starting spot right away. He's going to have to earn it. But with his versatility, he could play as a kind of a holding midfielder, or as a box-to-box player, or even as an attacking midfielder. I mean, he can really do everything. And I like that about him. I think that adds to that team as well. So I like the look of DC United, but I don't like it enough to really push them into the top 3 just yet. So we've come to the top 3 in the Eastern Conference now, and these 3 teams are really the big dogs of the conference. They were a league above everybody else last season. It was New York Red Bulls, NYCFC, and Toronto. They finished top 3 last season in that order, and I think that they're going to be the top 3 teams again, but maybe not in that particular order. So starting off with number 3, I think it's going to be New York Red Bulls. I believe I picked them to finish 3rd last season as well, and they came out of the gates so unbelievably bad. Like, I didn't even think they were going to be a playoff team after the first month and a half of the season, but then the spark hit, they turned it around, and they ended up winning the Eastern Conference with the best record. I couldn't believe that happened. Honestly, I did not expect that to happen. I did say last year that I believed in that leadership on that team. That leadership is now gone. Not all the way gone, but the captain of that team, Dax McCarty, is gone. So that's a big miss for them. That's going to hurt them a little bit, but I still think that they have the talent on that team and still enough veteran leaders there to guide them to a 3rd place finish. They very well could push for another top spot in the East again, but I don't think that it happens for the 3rd year in a row. I think that they slip a little bit, but they're still a very, very good team. In the number 2 spot, I'm going to go with the team that represented the East in the MLS Cup final last year, Toronto. I don't necessarily think that they've done anything roster-wise to move themselves up a notch, but I do think that New York maybe has kind of slipped down a little bit. I'm not saying Toronto's not going to be as good as they were, or they're going to be any worse, or maybe any better. I think that they're kind of still the same team they were. They haven't lost anybody, and that roster is still very, very good and very stacked. Also, starting off the season, not having to play like 7 games in a row on the road is going to help them get off to a little bit better start as well. So maybe they could push for the top spot. If they play like they did last year in the playoffs, they will win the Eastern Conference. That was ridiculous. But that's also counting on Jozy Altidore to replicate that performance, where he scored in every game in the MLS Cup playoffs except for the final, and it wasn't for lack of trying. It was only because of Stephen Fry's left hand that he didn't score. So, I mean, Jozy Altidore was just on another level last year in the playoffs, but counting on him to do that for a full season and not get injured, which is he has had problems with in the past, I don't think you can really necessarily count on that. So that's why I have them still not quite to the top of the East, but still right there. And that leaves the number 1 spot for NYCFC. They have made pretty decent strides since coming into the league, 2 seasons ago? I like what they've done this offseason, man. They've continued to impress me with the players that they've gotten into that team, the way it all fits together, and they haven't just gone out and gotten, good players or big name players or tried to make a splash, with names brought into the team like they kind of have done in the past. These players actually fill a role on that team, and I think that they're really, really going to help. I like the addition of Sean Okoli. He's, coming from Federal Way. I know a lot about him. Came up with the Sounders. He was a top goal scorer last year in the USL, and now he moves to NYCFC to kind of pair up top maybe with David Villa. I think that's going to really, really help them out a lot as far as goal scoring goes. Not that they need that, as they're one of the top goal scoring teams in the league. I also like the addition of Sean Johnson to kind of shore up that goalkeeper spot that was a bit suspect last year. I like the addition of Alexander Ring from Kaiserslautern. I think that's a good solid midfielder to bring into the team. Rodney Wallace, Maximiliano Morales. I mean, I like everything that they've done. And they were the best team on the road last year. That is unquestioned. 7 wins, more than anybody else on the road. At home, they struggled a little bit. If they can turn those 6 draws that they had at home into a couple more wins, I think that they're the best team in the Eastern Conference. And they definitely have the talent on the roster to do it. It's just that they have to go out and get the job done now. So those are my predictions for the Eastern Conference. I know there weren't many risky picks as far as like a team moving up 5 or 6 spots from where they finished last season. But that's really because not a lot of teams in the Eastern Conference went out and made significant upgrades to their roster this offseason. I would say the 3 teams that did the most and the best job were Chicago, Philadelphia, and NYCFC, and I have them moving up a little bit in the table from where they finished last season. Not a whole lot, but I think it was enough to at least upgrade where they finished from last season. So Yeah, it seems a lot of the teams were pretty satisfied to just stand pat and try to upgrade, you know, try to improve upon what they already have with their own players and try to develop their own talent, which is fine. I don't know if it's going to pay off for a couple of the teams. I thought some of the teams missed out on an opportunity to upgrade their roster. They had very glaring holes that they just didn't address. So we'll see how it all happens. You know what? It's the MLS. Anything could happen. Any team could make the playoffs. I could be completely wrong. Maybe Chicago comes out of nowhere. Probably not Chicago. I don't see it happening just because of how bad they've been recently. But maybe. You know what? Maybe. You know what? It's the MLS. I'm not going to write Chicago off. I think that they're going to be better. I don't think they're going to be a playoff team, but it's the MLS. Anything could happen. But that is going to be it for this one. If you have any feedback or comments, let me know in the comments below, and I'll make sure to respond to as many as possible. And I will see you guys when we come back tomorrow for the Western Conference preview. See ya.